Hello, everyone. It's Mary Edwards here with Connecting with the Stars, and I have my friend and special guest, Katie Paige, here today with me. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Mary. Thanks for having me.
Good. Good to see you back. So after a brief interview, info bio on you, we'll dive into some interesting stories about your new book that's out and also some other connections on the Colorado Ranch that you are so familiar with. It is always fascinating to hear more about. So for those of you who don't happen to know Katie, Katie Paige is Colorado MUFON's state director. She is a star investigator for MUFON and is the team lead administrator for MUFON's Mars team. She's the host of MUFON What's Up radio broadcast on kgradb.com, along with her co-hosts, Chris DePerno and Tara DeLewis. Apologize for the spelling, the mispronunciations here. Katie also conducts independent investigations and research, and she has been a presenter at several conferences and has appeared on many radio shows and podcasts, including Coast to Coast with George Knapp, Spaced Out Radio, and Coast to Coast Dark Becomes Light with Heidi Hollins, and many more. Most recently, Katie has been seen on travel channels UFO Witness, Gaia's Beyond Belief with George Noory, Small Town Monsters, On the Trail of UFOs, Night Visitors, and will appear in Ron James' new film, Accidental Truth. Katie is the author of Letters of Love and Light, 4 decades of UFO encounters, experiences, and sightings shared with ufologist R. Leo Sprinkle, PhD. She is currently writing her second book, High Strangeness on a Colorado Ranch, the Colorado Skinwalker Ranch, Craft, Cattle, Copters, Cryptids, cover-ups.
How could I resist that?
I mean, oh my God, alliteration times 5, and strangeness.1000. It's like 1,000 degree. Katie has personal ties to that Colorado ranch, that's for sure. This is what motivated her interest in ufology and to find answers to all her experiences. Well, it's a pleasure. You and I have met and have so many coincidences in our lives.
We do.
Where we grew up.
Mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing, and are always searching for the truth. And I'm so glad that I found you. We found each other last couple of years to really share some of these things. You can't make this up. You don't want to make it up, but right. it's a search and a drive, as we know. And particularly for women, really, because growing up, a lot of men were in this world, right? And
right.
For you particularly. But I'd love to hear a little bit about your letters of love and light first, and then we can dive into any other of the coincidences, and not coincidences, but connections with the real Skinwalker Ranch, the other Skinwalker Ranch that
we're so entangled, and reality is just not what people think it is. I'm learning that more and more every day. I'm like, what is this? Anyway, we'll get into that. But yeah, the book came about, I from the Colorado Ranch, I got into the field just searching for answers to what happened to me and my sister and my family out on this very high strangeness ranch. And we never knew anybody knew anything about it or that it was ever investigated. And in a book I came across, Hunt for the Skinwalker by George Knapp and Colm Kelleher, there's a chapter called Other Hotspots, and I started reading about this Colorado ranch, and I was like, oh my gosh, this has to be the ranch. And that's where I learned about Dr. Leo Sprinkle. Dr. Leo Sprinkle, unfortunately, we lost him in 2021. He was a dear, dear man and a pioneer in the field of ufology with contactees and abductees. And he was a hypnotherapist and a psychologist out of Laramie, Wyoming. And so, I only live in Colorado, 2.5 hours away. Dr. Leo was old school, wrote him a letter to confirm that this was indeed the location of the ranch in Colorado. And he quickly wrote me back. And within a week, I was down there sitting on Dr. Leo's couch. And, his whole body of work was stored at the Heritage Center there in in Wyoming, and anybody can go access that. And he has 74 boxes of letters and his work from people around the world. And what happened was I went there for selfish reasons to get all the files on the ranch, and I got lost in these letters. And I spent 3 years going back and forth to the archives and pulling every box that he had, going file to file to file, taking pictures of the letters. And then I'd go home and read all these letters and organize them into folders. And I thought, well, actually the title of the book, because Dr. Leo Sprinkled always signed his letters Love and Light Leo. And what was really neat is Leo kept all his response letters. So like from the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, I got to see how his train of thought and his feelings about the phenomenon itself progressed and changed. And so that in itself was fascinating. But I thought to myself, if I found these letters interesting, others would as well. And so I really got to become close with Dr. Leo, and I was so happy I completed that book, which he just was so proud of, before he left us. So I organized the letters into chapters. Like I have ET and craft descriptions, on hypnosis, letters from children, words from Leo. People would often write about like lucid dreaming, and they were like, this dream did not seem like a dream. It seems so real. So there's a chapter on that. One of the coolest letters I came across was a letter from a reverend out of Snowflake, Arizona. And he had a very similar abduction experience, just like Travis Walton out of Snowflake, Arizona. So I was like, oh my, from the 1930s. I was like, holy smokes, and another thing that happened as I'm reading just, hundreds and hundreds of letters, by the first sentence or paragraph, you kind of got to know the tone of the writer, right? And so, you could sort of tell just by the tone of the letters whether things were credible or not credible, or, if this was a professional or somebody who truly had a unique experience. So it was just fascinating to go through his body of work.
Wow, unbelievable. Was, I've been talking to my dad the last few months and hearing about being at Area 51 in December 19th with Werner von Braun for a whole day. I mean,
Right.
Unbelievable, because the past informs the present and the future.
Absolutely.
Yes, we always want to live in the now and move forward, but those stories, like these love and light stories that you're talking about, and what I'm hearing from my dad now is just mind blowing, because of course they were never allowed to say anything, as we know. And I've just found out about recently, since I've talked to you in the last few weeks, I was seriously part of, more mind control than I realized, and programs that I've mentioned to you before. But I really did realize that I have almost no memory of anything. And
right.
And that I will never be able to retrieve that. So now I'm over that part. But it's just,
Right.
it's really incredible. And Dad said a couple of days ago on the phone, he said, Mary, I'm so happy you found your tribe. You're doing these interviews, that you can live in a time, and all the incredible people that you're interviewing, because hi Dad, they're here. They're here. They couldn't ever talk about it. And I said, what was it like? I said, I've been lonely for 70 years, till you started telling me about it this last fall of 2022. And he said, yes, Mary, I had no one to talk to, because I was tested every day. I was working with the government and NASA. And he said, now I'm so free up here that I'm still talking to the ETs. I'm still working in labs. I'm still communicating with you and others down here helping. But he said that you're getting it now is unbelievable. So that's what,
right. And now this new law passed, I don't know if you're aware, just right after Christmas, that offers immunity to whistleblowers in the military and our government. Now, I'm curious to see if these people will come forward and actually share some of this information without fear of getting fired or losing their jobs or their pilot's license or whatnot. So we'll see what comes out of that. But at least we're taking big strides forward, so people don't feel like they can't talk anymore. And that's something, my sister and I lived with. We were threatened and warned never to talk about what happened at the ranch. We never knew anybody knew anything about it. And we lived with that our whole lives, until I found that information in that book and started researching this for 10 years. And people will often ask too, like, why are you researching something that happened so long ago? Why is that important? Well, it's important because we don't have answers yet, right? There's still so many unanswered questions. And I think the work that you're doing and the work that so many others are doing is talking about it opens the doors for other to come forward and not have that fear of ridicule. So I think that's an important
Exactly.
piece.
Well,
Yeah.
that's why it's so cool. And that's why we are here now to play our
Right.
part, to tell our own story. But also for people, we, grew up in the Chicago area, had connections with Wisconsin. A lot of
Yeah.
the Midwest wasn't really a part of it. And then I read about the Chicago Triangle because I'm obsessed with research like you are. I mean, you really are. And I'm going, oh my God, Chicago, sort of where I lived, and all the UFO sightings and sightings in the 50s and 60s, like when I got taken in 56. I'm reading now, it's starting, it is more is starting to come out. But I wonder, I'm sure it'll probably be a tsunami of information once the first few whistleblowers come out and
Yeah,
are still
I hope
alive
so.
with
Oh
it
man,
a
I'm
few
so
months,
hopeful. And it's so weird. We have this like Illinois tribe and this Wisconsin tribe. And, like we talked about, I'm
Yes.
originally from Illinois. I moved out here in 1970 to Colorado. So I was just a little thing out there. My grandparents lived in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. We have connections there
We had
as
houses
well.
in both
And my
places.
grandfather, who was a Navy man, had a sighting over Lake Como in Wisconsin and was investigated by J. Allen Hynek. I'm still searching for that case because I would just love to have it for my own family history. But all these really strange synchronicities. So it makes you wonder, like, what was going on then? Almost like these mass, I don't know, sightings. But in the case of the Lake Geneva sightings in the Wisconsin, my grandfather and my family and I witnessed these oblong shaped crafts. But I know David Marler did a lot of research in his book on triangles in Illinois. So, and that's still happening to this day. I was just doing a podcast with somebody who witnessed one of these large triangles. So fascinating stuff. And I don't think maybe some of those triangles are our own, but I believe that not all of them are.
No, and then just reading about, I told you about Dad's a company being in Dayton, Ohio, right next to
Oh, right.
Patterson. And I've been
Yep.
researching that. Oh my God, I'm getting information. But that's Dayton, Ohio. I mean, I used to drive through Ohio. I never went there. I didn't know he had a huge plant there and hangars built in, in the 50s and before then. So I've been digging through what is it now? And it's another company like that. So anyway, we've just begun the layers of research that hopefully will, as we know, we talk about it every day and it's coming out more and more. And there's such freedom now. I said, Dad, how did you live through that? And he said, well, just like you have for the last 70 years, you couldn't talk about it. You were sworn to secrecy. We were. And he said, he said, it's so, and a couple of times people would bring up something and I knew I couldn't go there because we were told to keep our traps shut. And you had to, and they saw the consequences of the people that didn't. But he just said, I said, do you miss it? He said, every day was amazing. I said, when did you go on your first craft? He said, age 7. And it was the thrill of my life. I mean, I'm learning things and all the planets that he went to, all the places he went. It's just, and the places I've been, he's seen all my off-planet work up there, the art and the design that I've been doing. Up until yesterday, he just said, oh my God. And then a couple other people that sort of appeared up on this chat with this medium that I was talking to. A few others came up and just said, oh yeah, hey Bob, it's so nice to meet you finally. I mean,
Well, it makes you really wonder.
A ripple effect of all these guys, mostly guys back then, right? That were 70 years of that. And then Dad's company was started in 1893 in Chicago and all those other places. So
it makes you wonder the technology, even back then in the 50s and 60s. I mean, the hidden technology that we must have is mind blowing. I mean, I've heard people say we're 40, 50, even 60 years ahead of what most people know that we have. So it makes you wonder what we do have, is there cloaking? Are we all those things that you're researching and looking into,
right.
it's like, wow, come on, this stuff I know it's trying to drip out a little bit right now, but it seems to me like things are dripping out and then we go backwards again where they shut the doors. So, just like with what the Navy just did. It's like, we're going to try and open the door and then boom, they shut it again. And I guess there's just so much at stake: money, power, free energy, and on and on and on. So, all this technology sure would change the world. And,
Right.
and that's something Dr. Leah Sprinkle was really passionate about, was Tesla energy and free energy and getting this out to the people and how it would change the world. He was also a big advocate for females in the field. So he was just a dear, dear man. And that book, to honor him, something that book also did for me, it made me humble really fast, because sometimes we can get a little ahead of ourselves or cocky with ourselves, thinking, oh yeah, I'm on to something here. And then I'm reading, letters from the 60s, and they're talking about the same thing that I just thought I knew
Engineering
he
and all
discovered.
these
And I'm just
like,
oh, I guess they thought about that decades ago,
well,
so
then
it
we
made me
dumb
humble.
ourselves down
Yeah.
every day, 100 times a day, but it is the opening. It is the age. It is the age of Aquarius. It is opening.
Right.
And
Yeah.
people can't stop it. And since there's so many mediums and so many people we can talk to, and whether people validate it or not, who cares really? I mean, it's a wide open world now where people can talk and think and tell their stories.
Right.
And that's what we do. You do every week on your show. I'm doing every day. It's so exciting because it is unfolding and the veil is like being ripped back. And right, it is this start and then freak out, pull it back, pull it down, put the blinders back on.
Right.
But that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's so exciting to see these different, before everything was so separate, the paranormal, the Bigfoot, the all this, and now people are starting to realize it's all interconnected in one way or another. And I'm seeing these different groups coming together finally. So that's another thing that's changing, and I think changing for the better.
Well, and Ray Hernandez and several people, spent 5 years to all the PhDs. I mean, the science is blending with spirituality. And even when I was in the 90s working at NASA and I wanted to check out pupillary dilation and heartbeat in the 90s down at Johnson Space Center, they built, led Yvonne and I built a full-size mock-up to test it. We have wanted the science ourselves too, but we're finally coming to the point because all those PhDs, all those engineers, all these people are coming out and saying, oh, well, yeah, I've been working on this for 30 or 40 years. And the Ray Hernandez and other people are connecting all those dots and putting those bigger pieces of the puzzle together. Yeah, it's all the same thing. I mean, I've seen a ghost, I've seen an angel. I would have never connected all of them. I always thought, is that me? Because I was on a craft and I saw ETs, and then I always it was, no, I always sort of figured it was, but we didn't, there was no confidence in these things that we couldn't talk about to anybody or our parents or families anyway.
Right. That's so true. That took me years because I always compartmentalized all those different experiences. And it really wasn't until Skinwalkers at the Pentagon where they're like, oh yeah, well, people that have visited Skinwalker Ranch, they see the blue orbs and they have these shadow beings and they have, paranormal activities around them. And I'm like, oh, okay. That happened to me as well. And so, yeah, that's why it's so critical that we communicate with one another.
And also, and everybody's story is real. I mean, maybe a few aren't, but everybody's story is their story. And that's what's nice about everyone coming out with whatever story. People don't have to believe that I've been off planet and done these things, but I believe everybody else because I know what it's like that I know those experiences are real. And a lot of the ones that now I know that have been totally washed, but 3 or 4 or 5 other people who I totally trust in this field validate me better than me because of so many things were washed in my past for all these reasons that they do it for. So anyway, I can't wait for today and tomorrow and every other day until we go up to the next level to keep enjoying this beautiful opening right now that is, we knew it was frequency, then it was consciousness, and it'll be 10 or 50 other things before the time we go to the next stage, hopefully, of what is next. Like, oh my God, we thought that in 2023. God, how dorky, how yesterday.
It's a slow opening, even for me. I mean, even with all the things I experienced, I'm so into research and documents, and like, I want the proof. I want to see it on paper. I want to find those answers. So it's been this slow opening for me where I was sort of I wouldn't use the word jaded, but I truly believed in paranormal things because I had so much happen to me, and after losing my dad and my brother, had some really interesting experiences of that. So I'm like, okay, I believe in life after death. The UFO phenomena, I took me a long time to even believe that that was a real phenomenon. It took me several years, in fact. And finally I was like, okay, the evidence, even though it's anecdotal, is overwhelming. There has to be something to this. And because in my mind, where the ranch is located is in Elbert County, Colorado, and we know for 100% fact the Air Force was involved. NORAD knew about it. So my question was always, how much was the military involved in this activity, right? And how much of it was unexplained activity? And now I'm like 50-50. I think 50% was military and 50% was unexplained phenomenon. So it's been an interesting progression of how that's come about. And same with the Sasquatches and crypto beings and all those different fields, and some of it's so hard to wrap your mind around. But the more you talk to people and the more open you are to this, you start to see that these are all just outside of our narrow little perceptions, and they all kind of live out right outside of that. And so it's really been fascinating to finally get to this point where I am being more open like you.
Right. Well, I was on a craft. I remember being on that craft at 5 and 6 and 10 and clearly. So it took me forever too, because I kept thinking I'm completely crazy. And literally, even though people have said that to me for 40, 50 years since I started going to astrologers, back in, as I've said before to you and others in the olden days, back then, because a ghost, I saw a 15-foot angel. Was I the angel, or was my grandmother? I've been validated that I was the angel because I have a lot of angelic in me. I mean, all these things I've just learned even in the last several months from all the uploads and downloads and everything, that this accelerated pace that we've been getting. But really, until my dad, even though people would call me a starseed and a baby mama because of all my hybrid kids, and wow, you have a family goes back to kings and queens, and wow. And I'm going, all I want to know is, did I really go? And literally, because of my father validating these to me over the last 6 months, yes, people I trust, I love, I got a step closer to it. But having my dad say, yes, I was with you at age 5. Yes, I experienced it too. So did my father. So did my grandfather. So did my great grandfather. And for him, coming through him, now that he's safe up there, and he said, I'm so happy I'm still doing all these incredible things and helping all you down there as much as I can, and still talking to ETs, and the military comes, and the government comes, so it's like, oh yeah, it was all one big bouillabaisse, not only of us hybrids, but one big bouillabaisse of the Army and the Navy, and he was a Navy pilot, as we know. So,
and you hear that a lot, that this runs in families, and for you, it's definitely a generational family affair.
Well, 94 generations, goes back to 0 AD, and I've confirmed it. I've spent thousands of dollars, which I don't have in my checking account now to live on, because I've given up all my interior work other than the free off planet stuff that I do. But no, it was like, I want many validations from people that I trust.
Right.
And I've gotten it for a long time, and particularly the last few years. And that's why it's going to be fun to go to a couple conferences this year too, and just hear more, learn more than we learn in our everyday life. And everybody's anxious to share all their new information, because it's been lockdown was a long time. And then now we have all these other things, but it's really going to be exploding. It's like a tsunami of new information, down to our cells. I mean, I was talking to somebody about evolutionary triggers the other day on an interview, and I was reading, our cellular structure, as we know, has changed. We can change our DNA. Our temperature of our bodies have changed because of our closeness to the sun. It's gone down. We're cooler now because of the heat of the sun. I mean, that our bones are not as dense because obviously we're not out like, cavemen over the generations.
Yeah.
And now we've got global warming, and whether people believe it or not, I surely do. You see it there. I've been, all my friends are flooded out of their homes all over California. I'm in San Francisco, but it's such a cool time right now for us. But now continue on. Sorry, we're just having such a good conversation.
I know.
This is part of it too. A lot of times we don't get a chance to even talk about how
Right.
what it's like to really go through the layers, and every layer, every layer of the onion we peel through, it's still not, oh yeah, I automatically believe it, because
Right.
I grew up with, everything is discernment. You check it and double check it, and you double check it, because I grew up with top secrets. I mean, I
Right.
do that with people. I mean, I don't let new people in very often.
Right.
I've always been sort of a hermit. I've always been very careful,
Hmm.
because even though I'm outgoing, and we grew up in these nice families, it's always been, okay, take a breath, do your research, stay back. And
Right.
people say, oh, you must go out every night with Mimi. And I go, never. COVID was a treat to me, because I could just really be home like
Right.
I always have been, just
I'm
doing
that way too,
I know.
and people, something that I found, and this is, I'm 4 chapters in my new book, the second book, High Strangeness on the Colorado Ranch. And this has taken me a while, because just like what you said, this is personal to me. And the more I learn, you have to process at the same time. So you're writing and you're researching and you're learning, but you also have to process it and deal with it, and deal with all the emotional stuff that comes with it, not being able to talk about it, to that ice, because I went through years of feeling isolated and depressed, and you go through almost like a PTSD stage,
Well,
where you
I've been
feel like you're the only one in the world that's
right,
experienced these things, and you have nobody to talk to. So you have to
right.
process all this too, and do the research and do the learning, and it's all, you know mixed together. So it takes a
And
while.
that integration. I mean, when I just heard again last week about my mind control
Mm.
and some of the things that went on with that, oh yuckarama. And I said, I said, I do want to remember. And they said, don't even try. My storefront.
Yeah.
They said, don't even try, and it's not worth it. And I said, okay, well, phew, then I really don't want to.
Yeah.
But I'm still integrating and processing that. And that's another wave, like you say, it's the hearing it, then it's like doing the research. It's a lifetime of
Right.
unfolding a Pandora's box that is not pleasant, a lot of it.
Not always pleasant. No. And
Now,
that's something, and I read that a lot in Dr. Leo Sprinkle's work, that a lot of these abductees and contactees, they go through these phases, and Dr. Leo Sprinkle named it the packs. And I actually have it here because I found it really fascinating. So his packs, and this is what he found through hundreds, if not thousands of contactees and abductees. But his packs were, the P stands for preparation, which is childhood visitation by strange spiritual beings, lucid dreams or precognitive dreams of possible future events, psychic experiences, including telepathy, clairvoyance, and seeing auras, etc. Then you move into the A phase, which is abduction, UFO sightings and or UFO abduction experiences, loss of time experiences, partial amnesia events, taken aboard spacecraft by spiritual beings or UFO entities, unexplained body marks, scars, emotional reactions like why me, feeling of being drafted for some unexplained purpose. The next is the C, the contact, adult visitations by spiritual beings, spiritual guides, mental messages about a duty or a mission, psychic experiences, telepathy, clairvoyance, PK, healing, etc., lucid dreams and or precognitive dreams of possible future, emotional reactions like why me, purpose of visitations, feeling of volunteering for a spiritual mission or task. Next is the training. I think this is interesting. Training is when we become obsessive compulsive behaviors, reading, traveling, visions, reading various materials, including uninteresting materials, change in personality, feeling of being monitored, implanted, knowledge, review of possible past lives. Finally, and where I think I'm at and where you are, Mary, is the S, the service. Okay.
yes.
That is channeling verbal or written information from spiritual beings, spiritual guides, serving as a messenger by conducting research, talking to others, providing instruction, healing, or assistance to others, working to minimize planetary difficulties, giving assistance to humankind, feeling that one knows his or her task or purpose in life. And so this was through Dr. Sprinkle's research, this pack. So he would
Beautiful. And
meet
I'm all
somebody
those
through
things.
hypnosis.
And so
Yeah.
are you. That I
And
don't
he would
right.
he would see where somebody is in that string of events. And so what often would come through is people they would get downloaded or messages saying, look, there's so many of things that you don't need to know, and you'll know it when you need to know it. In other words, we're not going to let you have access to whatever memories until you need to have access to it, because it could be really overwhelming and damaging and
they've been
shocking
telling me
to the
that
psyche.
forever. They said,
Yeah.
you're so like plating and so ADD. I said, well, I'm all those things, and I am.
Yeah.
I want that information now. And thank God that they dripped it to us too. Because when they said, write the book 15, 20, 25 years ago, I said, I don't have anything to write about. It was like, who said that? And I've been saying, why me, since I was a little girl, and everybody's looking at me. I mean, I remember saying that to my parents when I was the first words coming out of my mouth. Why is everybody looking at me? And they were, and they are.
Yeah.
And they're clones. I mean, it is unbelievable that all the things that I suspected, but I didn't know a lot of them were so good, because it's our galactic family.
Yeah.
And but it's also the others. Yeah. So it's so incredible that he listed those so perfectly. It sort of sends goosebumps up me, because
Right.
we get those in bits and pieces too. And no, I mean, yes, we know lost time. Yes, we all, my whole life has been.
Right.
I'm just glad that I finally got confirmed for like.
Yeah. Do you have the book? He wrote a wonderful book called Soul Samples. And
No, but
this
I get
was
it.
this is a culmination. It's a lot of statistical data on abductees and contactees. And because back in the day, people would go, they're all crazy. And he's like, well, I'm going to prove to you they're not. And he in fact did. And it's really an interesting book. So, but I think you're a little ahead of the game more than I am. I have strange memories. Dr. Leo Sprinkle put me under for an hour and a half under hypnosis, and just going through the hypnosis process was interesting because, I envisioned it to be a very different experience than it was. Back in the day, I was like, watch the swing, and you're going to do what I tell you. And it wasn't like that at all. It's, you go into a very deep, relaxed state, and you're laying back in the chair, and, you're able to communicate and talk. I kept my eyes closed the whole time, but it's a very, very, very deep state of relaxation. Have you ever been hypnotized like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been obsessed by that too.
Yeah.
Except that also now that I know that I really was part of mind control. I mean, I literally heard 3 days ago that I had electromagnetic shocks, 20 or 30 of them between age 3 and 10.
Oh, wow.
And I was also hypnotized. So over the years, when I've tried to reach out and done some of these things, but I've had real ones, I'm always going, you're not going to be able to hypnotize me. I know from the past, even though I didn't really know, because I didn't really want to believe that I had on top of, 100 hybridization eggs taken, and all the craft work. And yes, at age 10, I went on one of the big craft, and I can remember things going on in my head that I thought those were always positive things. Then they took me to Mars and Jupiter, started my training to be able to do what I've been doing the rest of my life, and a lot more the last few years. But I just hearing that, and then some of the other couple things that I was in that really was weirder and creepier that I'm glad I don't remember. No, but it's a sense that I have no memory. I have no memory. And I'm really proud of myself more the last week of some of these sessions that I've had. But yes, I had Barbara Lamb interview, do regressions when I met her, and I wanted to do the book with her. And I flew down with her and said, do you want to do a book? And let's do 2 regressions so I can prove to you and of myself again that I did it, but I really trust you. And of course, we spent a lot of time doing the book after that, for a year after. And then Misha Johnston, and then Geraldine I had done. I mean, I have had lots of different things, but it's always, I say, you're going to have to really go deeper with me. I can drop in when I'm out in nature because I'm so connected to nature. I know I can drop in when I'm doing my art. I go into portals. I go into when you're writing, and when I'm drawing and designing and stuff, I'm just gone. So I can be
You just
like,
hyper focus
for my whole life doing my art, my design. And in nature, running and being on the water, like Michigan in our backyard, or like Geneva in our backyard. Here, San Francisco, the bay's like 4 minutes away from me here, and I've got the rooftop pool that I go up and dip my feet in to get my ley line above me. Our basement's been flooding, so I've got it above and below me, to the east and the west of me. But yeah, those it's everything that I knew. I hate to say, I already knew all those things.
Mhm.
They opened up a few. I think they helped unlock maybe a little bit more, but it's the combination of that, because I want to get information from everywhere, all the different mediums and psychics, and different, from a William Henry to somebody down in Sedona, to somebody that I've been doing nonstop for 4-5 years, since I went to that first contact in the desert and met
Right.
Al Emery Smith in the old days, Randy Weitenheimer, JJ, and a lot of those guys in the beginning, when I'm going, wow, there are a lot of me around here. So I just sort of going, you know, and I was taking Sarsi classes. I took a 5-hour class. I've been taking classes nonstop, and I got to take 2 more classes. So I just want to keep learning, so I can open
Right.
myself up, so I can understand more, and also be more effective to helping children and others.
Right.
All this whole discomfort and weirdness, just make it, this has happened to millions of people.
Right.
This
It's
is-
definitely a process. And I
and
think we
people
go
who
through that. Yeah.
and people who trust me after doing, you know, $1 billion homes for these clients for 40 or 50 years, I go, Mary, you know, I've only told this to a handful of people. Now they say, well, we trust you so much, we don't think, are you really, like, you're not on drugs? We know you don't
Right.
really drink, because I can have 2 glasses or 1 glass of wine and I'm pretty much, because I've never been out there anyway. Friends of
Right.
mine, everybody knows that. So I have the trust for my background of other stuff while I was doing these other things on the side.
Right.
Yeah, those helped open the doors, but mostly what I found doing these interviews since the fall on Conscious Awakening Network, this allowing me to have my voice, because I never had a voice. My throat chakra,
Right. That chakra.
high chakra, and I have done a lot of work on this chakra and then my lower chakras for other obvious reasons. And just knowing that I had such intense, terrifying mind control, which I knew, and I just told, I mean, I really told, I only told my son and a few people about it, other than a few readings that I've had about it, to validate it from several different people who don't know each other. I keep everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I open book to you, and I'm starting to talk about this, because unless we dig deep, as we know, we're not going to get, you know, the deeper we go, the higher we go, the more awful it is, the higher we go, and the more we can share with the few people that really even want to hear it, but like us.
Right.
And we're not crazy, but I still feel crazy some of the time.
Even it's interesting, just in passing conversations. About a month and a half ago, I was at some good friends' houses, and we were talking about just strange memories that I had. Just like, I think we've talked about it too, like being pulled out of class all the time when I was in elementary school for getting like these headphones on and playing all these weird games and pathology and ADD and all this. And I'm thinking, I didn't have any speech impediment. Like, why was I being pulled out all the time? And I was remembering, because, you know, one memory triggers another memory. And so I'm like, I used to write in symbols in like columns when I was a kid. And so
like you did, right?
Like, okay, I'm going to give you sticky notes, because the friend I was with too, I don't want to give his name away, but he's a well-known person, so I don't want to call out his name, but they're like, okay, you go upstairs and you draw your symbol, and you stay down here at the kitchen table and you draw your symbol, and we'll see if they compare. So I have them actually sitting right here on my desk. So let me cover up his name. So this is my friend's symbol that he drew all the time.
Yes.
And this one was mine.
Yep. And I've drawn that symbol too. And I've designed fabric out of yours, not in the 3-dimensional one. But also, if you look at my logo, which is really crazy. And
if we don't talk to each other, we would never know these things. And you should have seen us. We're like, oh, what does that mean?
I mean, where is it? It's in the other room. I don't want to walk away from it. But it was a combination of that shape that I did in an ME, because it was like almost like an M and an E. And I've been repeating that.
Yeah.
Like
what does that mean? I wonder what that means.
Well, because we go back, I know I go back to Egypt, and I know I was an architect for one of the many pyramids there, and then was killed. I would go back to Atlantis. In the beginning, it was art. Remember, we know it was all about art and design. So from the beginning of time, and that's when our history class, even when I was 19, I walked in. Where is it in here? I don't. Maybe it's in another book. I saw one of those ancient paintings like we all see. And I said, oh my God, I've been there. And I was like, oh, this is what I put
fascinating.
together a couple years ago. At age 18,
Oh.
on my first day of art history class, I was exposed to art that included the ETs that awakened another thing of path. I've been drawing, painting rocks and looking, and traveled. I was at Stonehenge at 10. I've been all over the world. I've been fascinated by petroglyphs, hieroglyphs, all crop circles, all these things that are, it's telling stories as we know. It's the codes that we're waking up to finally now that you and I are, the same pattern. It's energy, just like circles are.
Yeah, and the spirals is another big thing. The spirals and all that.
It's all the things that we keep seeing. And because we do architecture now, look at them. I mean, I'm obsessed by these. I wanted to do a book. I wanted to go around the world when I was like 25 and take pictures and photograph.
So cool.
Study all these things. Look at it. And I've been drawing stars my whole life. I mean, if we take a minute, which we all did more of even in COVID, I go back and I go, oh my God, all the art I've ever done.
Right.
It's all right here. The stars on the wall. Look at that. I drew that star. I've been drawing stars and patterns and my DNA. And so it's in our subconscious, and it comes out through art. I'm not a writer very well, but you are. But we all have those symbols that are from past lives.
It comes out in music and all sorts of.
It comes out in music and poetry, however we're creative. And that's why I love working with, I've taught art to kids and designed to college students and doing all that stuff now. And then just on my cards, are always different.
Yeah, love that. I love that.
Like, everyone is either a pattern or a star. It's all about finding out who me is, my initials, Mary Edwards. Who am I? We are about finding out who we are. Then we can figure out the rest of the people in the world.
So much truth to that. Yeah.
But we do have so much in common. It's crazy. And the Midwest was a powerhouse. When I found out that Dad had that huge plant in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and stuff that's under somebody else's name right now. But I just thought, oh my God, no wonder he was traveling all the time. It wasn't just Chicago and White Sands and Cape Canaveral. It was all those underground things that I've been seeing in dreams my whole life, zooming through miles and miles and miles of underground crystals. That one up there, that top one is Crystal City.
Crystals, yeah.
Crystals, and that's what I saw. Going back to my Atlanta time,
so interesting.
Female dog.
And I wonder about that on the ranch. Some of the first things that were reported on that ranch property were these humming sounds. Sometimes they'd get so loud you couldn't hear yourself speak over that, and these bangs and sounds from underground. And there wasn't anything underground that we're aware of. But now, listening to David Pilates, his new film, Missing 401 and the UFO Connection, which is really good. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. But they talk about these aquifers and this water connection and these, underground things. And I'm wondering, with all the military bases in Colorado Springs, were they tunneling? What was underground? Is there something underground? Is that why they were out there? I don't know. I have all these questions.
Yes, they were. They're all connected all over the country. I mean, they're all, that's huge ones, acres, hundreds of acres, miles and miles, 20, 30, 40, 50. Dad said they're probably a couple million square feet under Area 51 now. Millions.
It's like, how do they tunnel, and where does all that dirt go? How do they do that?
But also the dirt goes into some of the mines in Utah and some of the different places. It's all connected with the government. So you dig out, and then somebody over there needs the dirt that you're not going to see to transport it. And then when they used my DNA on, I think it was Jupiter, to create these rat-like things that would tunnel off planet on these subsurface, they had diamond-tipped teeth to be able to dig through the caves, because inner Earth, a lot of these inner planets are rock. So, and I said, well, okay, so you're telling me they use my DNA. That's really creepy. It's not for children, but that's okay, because that's humanity for the future. But rats? And I said, well, my second question is, now that you say that, how are there not millions of rats under the earth in these confined, several hundred football fields big to several thousand square feet? I said, why aren't there a million rats down there if you started doing this years ago with my DNA? And they
Right.
said, oh, we time lapse there. So they died. So I said, oh, and then did you recycle that into something else? So, I mean, I don't think, I think we all this has been going on forever. And
Interesting.
so anyway, so more connect, more.
I want to find rats with diamond teeth. I'll just take their teeth.
I know, really. But isn't that crazy? I mean,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
I haven't heard that before. Yeah. So I wonder what's underground there, and I wonder what the military involvement is. And of course, back in the day from 75 to 78, when Linda Moulton Howe was out there, she did a film called The Strange Harvest, and she interviewed the Undersheriff Bill Waugh out of Elbert County and George Yarnell. I mean, mutilations were occurring almost daily out there, and clear across the Midwest, actually, from Montana down to Wyoming to Texas to Kansas, Nebraska, Utah, and so forth. Now, Colorado, Elbert County, in the area where the ranch was hit the hardest by far. And it wasn't just cattle, but sheep and horse and dog. And people were very frightened. It was a very uneasy feeling. There was a $10,000 reward to catch these people. And at the time, they thought maybe they were cults out there conducting these. There were unmarked helicopters chasing and menacing people. I mean, the people had loaded shotguns, and like you didn't go up to somebody's house at night, and so I don't know. And I know just recently they were saying that the mutilations were carried out just strictly by the military, checking ground and water for whatnot from the Titan missile silos and that. But from the interviews I've done and people I've talked to, not all of them can be explained away by the military alone. So something nefarious was going on, or something else. And of course, I don't claim to be the mutilation specialist. In fact, I kind of avoided that subject for years because it's so convoluted. Chuck Sikowski, Debbie Ziegelmeyer's brother, has researched that a lot, as well as Christopher O'Brien. He's written a few books on that as well, like Mystery Stalks the Prairie. And in one of his books, I'm not sure which one it is, he talks about that one of the first mutilations, they left the carcass of the mutilated cow on the doorstep of NORAD as like some sort of a warning, perhaps. I don't know. I'm like, what is that about?
Well, because we are here. It's always we are here, and positive and negative. I mean, the way the good ETs too shut down all the nuclear plants and are part of it's experimentation. I don't know anything, but sure, it's partly experimentation. I mean, the way I was probed, and me and my family and my father, and all the way back 94 generations, it goes all the way back to 0 AD. But yeah, and it's also, what do each of the species or the government, what do they want to know? Is it the organs? Is it the blood? It's all those things. I've read a bunch about it too, because I've always, that of all the things creeps me out probably the most.
Right.
It's all part of the same thing, the investigation, the curiosity of us humans for the blood, for our DNA, a lot of it's DNA, for hybridization. I think a lot of that for the reproducing hybrids. I mean, a couple of my kids have 6 fingers on each side. They have a couple of them, one has webbed feet. Most of them are plating Arcturian from my eggs, and because of who I was and am and have been on and off. But I just think it's a melting pot of the good and the bad, and then the curiosity of wanting to use our DNA. But again, as I don't know anything, but it's equally as fascinating, but it's too perfect. It's like how perfect a crop circle is. It's the same kind of thing. I think it's a lot of investigation for maybe some of the non-benevolent groups that want, are trying to steal stuff. But a lot of it was just curiosity. And as I've talked to Dad more and more, he keeps saying, well, we need more refinement. He said, even the way you were handled married in the 50s, the Greys didn't mean to do that to you. They didn't know they were so sort of crude in there, and they've really changed that. And in the 90s, it went more organic. So they did.
That's interesting, because through the Mars program, which by the way is the MUFON archive research and redacting system. So it was all the pre-CMS computerized cases. They were all on paper. And so there was a team of 15 people within MUFON that I headed up that we took out all the, sensitive personal information. So those old case files could be open to researchers and investigators. And in reading those, because we'd have to read each case file. Sometimes there's 375 pages per case or whatever. And in fact, Travis Walton's original case file was in there. That was fascinating to see.
Wow.
But so you'd read it not only once but twice, because we didn't want to miss anything there that shouldn't get out there in the public domain. And it was interesting to see how the phenomenon and the reports changed through the decades. So, for obvious reasons, my favorite decade to research is the 70s, just because that's when all this stuff happened when I was a young girl. But you would see like more landed craft or aliens in suits and, different. And then now, of course, we're getting a lot of these Tic Tac shaped reports since the Nimitz incident and that. However, I feel like a lot of the oblong shaped craft, just like what my grandfather saw, that we described them as an oblong shaped craft, but Tic Tacs are oblong. So, are those the same type of thing? Could be the same thing.
Improved version of the past.
Yeah, right. And it's more streamlined and smaller. They used to be bigger and a little more clunky.
Right. And that was the time, the 60s. I mean, I remember 69 coming home when Senator Percy, living next door to us, daughter was murdered. And we came home, they were talking about, was it the government? Was it somebody this? Was it somebody this? And I remember just watching, we went on the moon at that time. And a friend of mine that I mentioned that I was talking to yesterday, and they said, oh, did you ever see the Conspiracy Theory, the movie from 1979 with Julia Roberts? So I watched it again last night because I was talking about that. I heard of it, that I was really in severe mind control, which is why I don't remember almost anything. And so I watched it, and I said, of course, I watched it a bunch of times. Like I watched E.T. Oh no, like 15 times, like we all did.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977. I always laugh. I'm like, was I the only kid who thought that was a documentary? I thought that was like, because I was kind of experienced.
It was, and there's Spielberg gave the information to, But anyway, and Dad was saying yesterday when I talked to him up there, he said, oh God, Mary, so much was going on then. So much was going on. I was at Mars then. I was going off planet. I mean, it was insane how things were exploding back then, right? That was the time. You should get on the phone call. We'll get on a phone call with him sometime, with my person, and we'll ask him. We'll ask him. He'd love to talk to you and talk Lake Geneva and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'd be curious if my grandfather George, who was a Navy man, knew of anybody in your family. That would be interesting, because it's a pretty small community, really.
It was a small community,
especially back then, especially in the 50s and 60s. So. Right. And he was a Mason. I know he was a Mason. So I don't know if you have connections to that, but, interesting, and I do find that. And I, reading through these letters, interestingly enough, a lot of contactees and abductees do have military family backgrounds, or, so I'm like, what's that about? Are they picking and choosing these families that are connected in that way in the Navy, typically Navy, Air Force, but also Army as well?
Well, yes, absolutely. Because I don't know if you remember that I mentioned that my family worked with in the, let's see. Well, they were involved with the government and from my great uncle was a mayor of San Francisco. Right. Roger Sherman helped write the Declaration of Independence. I mean, my family goes back from William Bradford on all these different layers, and that's not braggadocious. Just I've been trying to figure out, connect all these dots too. But Roosevelt's 4-point program, I mean, Truman's 4-point program involved my Uncle George and Uncle Al. And they were part of and they were doing international business to promote all different kinds of business. Obviously it was space, right? But that was, way back then. And there's a picture, I was just looking it up to see if I could find it here, of Dad's 2 brothers and a general that got him out of going to the war because they were so involved in this 4-point program. Let me see. Oh, here's a picture of Dad when he was Navy, World War II pilot. Lieutenant.
Wow.
But so they go back to, here it is, and they got an award for helping with the Manhattan Project.
Oh, interesting. Now that's an interesting connection.
No, Dad was, and I said to Dad the other day, how much work were you doing with the Manhattan Project? He said, oh, back then about 15% of the time. So here's, it's too hard to read. It says, Alfred and George Edwards received Army Navy E Award from Captain McKee for Woodruff and Edwards' wartime work. So that was their family company. So they got out. The 4-point program was a big deal. 1949 through World War II, President Truman, the federal government came to the Edwards family to participate in a newly created 4-point program to work with foreign business to help them promote more productivity in the United States. They traveled to Japan, Panama, Costa Rica, etc. My father was involved with the U.S. government, NASA, and served in the Navy, and blah blah blah. So I've been trying to track.
So amazing, Mary. That's just incredible.
And then Dad's all trips to Area 51
and Roswell and all
and
that.
Roswell. So that's. Like,
and then, of course, that's something I've been researching.
I know
years ago came, this Denver Roswell body connection with, it involves Truman and Eisenhower's and Mamie and Denver and the Mason Lodge and all sorts of crazy connections.
Well, my family knew them because our Sherman Ranch, that huge ranch in Kansas, where they take the cattle down to Texas, where they found oil, and Pancho Villa took it over. And, and then they moved after Pancho Villa took over the Sherman Ranch. He moved to Arizona and developed Prescott and a lot of Arizona. And then after his health got better, he moved to California and created Sherman Oaks and then developed down to Hollywood. So there, those were the big family. There were a handful of those,
And of course, there's the Bushes there in Texas, Bush Senior.
Well, I've met him a bunch of times, and my brother-in-law was at Andover and Yale and Harvard Law with George W. So I met him a few times with friends of mine in Colorado who were on a different side than I was, but I met him several times. I said, "Oh, do you remember A.C. Johnston?" He said, "Oh yeah, he was a great buddy." A.C. him when he was in the White House because he was living in Washington at the time. So anyway, there's a lot of those connections because it was the Girl Boys Club back then. I think
exactly.
Bohemian Club and all the and smart men and women, some women, and it was a small world back then. They got away with whatever they wanted to do. And Dad's company, I obviously know now, was under that, whatever it was, Truman or Eisenhower that did the Privacy Act where you could do a business. And so that's why
I'm really starting to believe that the big secret, although I would love the truth of, aliens and ETs to come forward. But when I believe it was either in Las Vegas or Irvine, California, where we had Lou Elizondo speak to the MUFON symposium, and he came out and one of his famous quotes, he said, "We're going to be having a fundamentally different conversation a year from now." And in that moment, it kind of hit me that I think what he's really talking about and what the big secret is, hiding what reality truly is and how it really works. To me, that's the big secret.
Well, that's the big secret. And what I've just been learning a lot the last 14 months, 2 years, and particularly the last few weeks. This was our old US of A. This was not that I've been protected by my friends up there, and it's down here. And I've learned a lot from my father too. Really, well, it was a combination of all of them because they were all intertwined, just like ghosts and UFOs and all these other things. It's the same as up there, down here too. That you can't really separate them out. And growing up with that, I was always going like, I mean, are those really men in black? Who are those senators? What are they doing here? No, I mean, I was like, my whole life was just like going, and my sister, my mom, my sister, nobody else is looking around. I'm going, something really weird going on here. So we were that's why we investigate, and you really do. But that's why we're here, because we were, as women too, we didn't count in those conversations. And then hearing the other day, even Dad even say that he never talked to his brothers about it, that his dad and the grandfather, who were also in this whole, both here and there, and then only me. And I asked my other sister about it that lives here a couple of days ago, and she said, no, like so, it has been lonely throughout all these decades to not really know the truth. And that's all I want is truth. I speak the truth. I can't, we're Midwesterners. We are true blue water. We're like Elsie the cow. I love, well, there's a truth. There's nothing to hide anyway anymore, because we are careful with who we speak to and how we speak. And we want to just protect our children and
Right.
others and ourselves, because we have families and we don't want to do anything stupid.
That is so true. And you know, that's what I'm out looking to do as well, is to find whatever truth I can, no matter where that leads me. Whether it's, you know, our own technology, our military, our Black Access projects, or if it leads me to extraterrestrial, whatever that truth is, I'm out there trying to seek it. And I always joke to people, I'm like, okay, if one day I stop talking and you don't see me anymore, I was just paid off. I was either paid off or they threaten my family. Because you're right, we do have families and we have to be careful. And credibility is very important to me as well. I take my research very seriously, and still digging. And it's so important to keep talking and keep interviewing people, because, you know, this was, you know, these old timers are kind of going off, you know, dying off on me. So I'm like, deathbed confessions. I like those, because at some point you have nothing left to lose. And you want to get that truth out there. So, you know, little by little, I'm learning more and more. And I think we all are, and we all have different pieces to the puzzle.
Well,
You
we
know?
really do. And
Yeah.
I trust you and you trust me. And
Yeah.
most of us trust each other, because
Right.
we wouldn't be obsessed the way we are with doing this.
That's so
I
true.
used to make a lot of money a long time ago, for a long time. And all I've done is been paying people to learn more and learn more. And I know it'll all I mean, I never planned to, I've just always followed what I've loved. I've always
Right.
followed this, and it's always involved
Me too.
space, children and people, and creating better, happier, healthier spaces
Yeah.
for all of us. And we've always done what we love, because we're honest, straightforward people who just want to be of service and help
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. I've
Right.
been that way forever, like you have. I know
Yeah.
that. That's
Yeah.
why I
Yeah.
love you.
Yeah. Right back at you.
Right.
This has been a very fun conversation, very interesting. And wow, this is kind of mind blowing, all these connections and synchronicities. And I've had so many just happen that just, I don't even call them synchronicities anymore. It's just like, okay, you know, things that how did this even happen? But they do. And I just don't even question it anymore. I'm just
I
like,
don't
okay, I'll
either.
just,
I haven't used synchronicities or quinky dinks, I call them, forever with the kids. We were meant to meet. We're all
yeah,
meant to meet who we're meeting, and their
yeah,
disclosure comes from us,
yeah,
from our hearts, our souls, our memories, our truth. And that's why your dad said, I said, are you helping individuals over the last many years? Because the corporations are big and complicated. And he said, yes, a lot of us up here are still helping. He said, I did it down there and I do it up here, and I'm still helping people. I'm still creating, and I'm talking to ETs, and I'm talking to other people. They still come to me for questions and answers, and I help wherever I can. And we'll be the same way. And I told Alex at the Ramsey show a couple of days ago, I said, if I don't come back someday from one of my trips, everything's all set up. This is yours. I have it all written. They talked to my baker last week that I don't really have anything left in it, but I said, it's all yours. And I said, it's not that I said, it's not because I get bummed out. We're warriors. We are sensitive, empathic warriors here. I said, it's just, I'm saying goodbye now in case I disappear tomorrow, or in 5 years or 10 years. I love you. You made my life. You taught me about love, him and Lizzie. You know, our children taught us about love, and we moms, all we care about is passing on. And all people who don't have children, we're all here to help heal. It's all about, as Dad said, Mary, I said, what about healing? He said, as you know, we've always been healing. We've always been on this
healing each other and the planet.
Healing each other and the planet.
Yeah. And I would love to believe, and sometimes I've had little winks from above that Dr. Leo Sprinkle's got my back and is helping me along from the other side too. And
Let's shout out to
and I
him
love
and
that.
Dad right now. Of course they are.
I love that.
I know that. And I know he is too. So on that note, we help each other down here still, because we're still swimming through the high waters, the tsunami and the calm, to try to figure this out. Anyway, thank you so much for being here today. I love you and can't wait for the next one.
Thank you so much for having me. I love you back. It's been fun.
Okay, bye.